Hello, everybody. I'll take this off. Hello, everybody. My name is Kilian. I'm a DSA member. Last year, I was the Northern Branch Chair for the Delaware DSA chapter. We put together this slideshow. It's our new member orientation slideshow. We're going to post it online for anybody to watch because we think that this has a lot of really good information for people who are curious about DSA, who might want to know more or want to see a little bit inside the organization without being inside of it. So we'll get started. This is normally the presentation that we use for our member orientation. We developed this with notes from National with some other pieces from other chapters, but this was a community volunteer effort to put this all together. The agenda normally has three parts. The first, where we explain Robert's rules, the kind of method of doing our discussions. Then we have an intro to DSA and to socialism, how we interpret that, what we think about socialism, how we define it, and the way that we act on some kind of socialistic principles. And then the last thing is a little bit about Delaware DSA, which is the chapter that I'm from. I'm living in Delaware. I'm a Delawarean. So that is my chapter. A little meme. So first, we would normally go into a little explanation about Robert's Rules of Order. This is a method of conducting meetings that is actually really old. It originated in the 1800s with the American military. A man, I think last name Roberts, came up with some rules to create a method of discussion where consensus is made while all minority voices are heard that want to be heard. I'm not going to go into that much here. If you're interested in learning more about Robert's Rules of Order, there's plenty of resources online for that. Now into the meat of it. What is democratic socialism? What are we doing here? What's the point of all this? So the idea of a democratic socialism is derived from the idea of the worker ownership over the means of production. So a democratic socialist mode of organization is one where all of the matters in a country, in a company, wherever the democratic socialists are running it, everything should be under some kind of democratic control, including the economics of that organization. So some guiding principles of this are, first, from each what they can provide, and to each what they need. That, I think, comes straight from Marx. People often say that it's people over profit. I think that it's a little deeper than that. It's like life of the world, of the ecosystem, of economies and of the people within them. Those things have to come before profits, is the way that a socialist thinks. The last is the democratic part, that is that for every one person, there is one vote. There's no buying shares to have more votes. There is no being bigger and stronger than somebody and bullying others into voting in the way that you want. No, your vote is your vote. Everybody else's vote is their own. To kind of hammer in the differences between what we think of as socialist democracy versus the liberal democracy that people are used to, there's a bunch of different ways to go about it. Basically, the liberal democracy has a totally different party system, economic base, power mechanisms, and overarching ideal about it than the idea of a socialist democracy. Within liberal democracy, there's often multiple parties. But you see over time that those parties coalesce into one or two interests, often just all about moneyed interests, really, at the end of the day. Meanwhile, under a socialist democracy, the idea is that there is one party that represents the people, and that is a representation against the interests of capital, which has always run things. Within that single party, there should be lots of representation of different ideas, of different viewpoints, of different cultures, of different backgrounds, and so these things kind of take a similar shape, actually, when you kind of squint your eyes at them, but the function is very different. The economic base, of course, is also very different. So liberals believe that they might be able to regulate capitalism into it being kind, into giving all the things that one might need for life, as long as we regulate it in a certain way. The socialists hold no delusions. History has never shown that liberalism has ever done that. So the idea is to provoke worker ownership over the products that they create, over the machines that they use, and over the work that they do, and to put resources into common ownership rather than to leave those things into the hands of private solicitors. The power mechanisms to do these things are very different. So for liberals, they like to separate powers. No one man should have all that power. It's not exactly the right way. Yeah, that was a critique, but where there's often a separation of powers that's really done so that power is kept away from certain people. Meanwhile, within a democratic centralist organization, that would be a democratic organization that has democratic discussion. They vote, and then there is programmatic unity after discussion, after people have given their ideas, have deliberated, have heard counter arguments. This way, everybody is consulted, but there is a unity in action, as opposed to the liberal version where the separation of powers has there's legislation, there is the judiciary, there's the executive. Each of these people get to do certain things, and it gets to be this whole confusing mess. But they really just check each other into not really doing anything except pushing forward the interests of the people who have always been there. Legislative elections, once every 4 years we have an election, once every 2 years we have a local election. A socialist democracy finds that to be extremely limited. The mass organization is a much more robust way to socialists for us to be able to communicate with people in power, to give our perspectives, to get theirs, and for everybody to always be included, rather than there just being like a day, some random day in the year that people are not allowed to leave work for. They're not, somebody's got to work the restaurants that you go to after you go put in your vote, So within a capitalist liberal democracy, the elections are there, but they're very clearly not for everybody. Within a socialist democracy, the mass organizations are used to facilitate everybody's opinion, ideally. And these are all for these certain ideals. One is that liberalism comes from the liberal tradition, where liberty might be found through individual action. Socialists, they have a different perspective historically, and that's that equity can be built between different people, between different societies, through collective action between those people. And so you see the different goals and the different methods kind of go through those lenses. So what is DSA then? We've gone kind of highbrow with the theory of it. I promise that's as much as we'll do today. DSA stands for some democratic socialism. That is the worker ownership over the means of production, and the democratic, specifically, ownership. DSA is not yet a party. People think that we are a party, but for the moment, and since its foundation, it was campus and community-based chapters with a national body over top of it trying to help coordinate things. It is today the largest socialist organization in the United States. I don't believe it is historically the largest. The Socialist Party of America, which was around in the early 1900s, I think they had over 100,000 people. Not a lot more, but some more. This presentation was made a couple months ago when DSA still had 90,000 members. We are well over 100,000 now, and growing. But the thing that people get wrong about DSA the most is that it's one thing, and that it's, every chapter has like a party line. Democratic centralism was only unbanned within DSA in the last year. Every single chapter has had its own course of development, has its own priorities, has its own people, ideas, perspectives, on and on and on. So with this hodgepodge, it really is a big tent of different ideas, people using different tactics, from electoral to direct action. And everybody's goal is to try and build a working class movement so that we can all fight for something different. And then how does it work if we're all doing this big tent thing? This first sentence up there, DSA is a big tent mass organization that's run by its members. Every single word in that sentence is active. Every single one has a very clear and actionable meaning. It is a big tent. That means that there's more than one ideology. This may change at some point. I do think that there will be a change in the development. There's always been different caucuses. They form, they break, they argue, they will coalesce. But regardless, there is a culture of debate and of good faith cooperation, we'll say, that allows for differences in different political opinions to express themselves while work still is done. Next is the mass organization part. It is a party for everybody. Though we're not a party yet, a political party, we are an organization for anybody who wants to join. Some might have issues with that. Some might want certain let's say like you have to call yourself a socialist or you must be anti-Zionist, for example. But in general, unless you really rub people the wrong ways, you are like this is for everybody. And then the last thing is truly the actionable part, is that it's run by its members. Unlike the Democratic Party, unlike the Republican Party, unlike the Green Party or any other party, even the PSL, this is an organization that is truly accountable to the people at the very bottom. You can join this. You can run for a spot in the national convention. You can vote. You can set the course of DSA history. Anybody can do that. I did it. I thought I could, and I did it. The national convention I just mentioned, that is the highest body in the DSA. Every 2 years, it's a group of people who get together. Every chapter is apportioned a certain amount of delegates based on how many people they've got, and they will send those people there to make the hardest decisions for DSA. I would love for that to be meeting more frequently. As of right now, it's every 2 years. Last year, Delaware DSA was apportioned 4 of those delegates, which I was one. It was a really fun time, and I think that it is a really cool example of the budding national socialist democracy that we have here in America. In between those conventions, so the convention is the highest body. It is literally members sending themselves to some place to vote. But between that time, there's 2 years that somebody needs to run the organization. So the convention elects NPC members. That is the National Political Committee. Those are the people that run the org between conventions. They do a ton of work. Recently, we expanded the NPC. I think it had 13 or so people on it. Now it has 24 or 25, including somebody from YDSA. The NPC, along with most other bodies within DSA, is headed by 2 people, 2 co-chairs. And so those are kind of those aren't party leaders. Those aren't people that we have to listen to or that like do everything. They are volunteers who work very hard and who've made it to the top of the DSA system by their word and their work. Here's some of the promotionals from the last 2 national conventions, both in Chicago. Like I mentioned before, there is YDSA as well as DSA. DSA is for everybody. Anybody can join, including students, but YDSA is specifically for campus formations. They do develop themselves differently than DSA chapters. The one that is local here in our University of Delaware, they're very active. They weren't for a while, and then they were just very put together out of nowhere. Our local DSA has a very confederated structure, so there's uneven development in different parts of it. It's totally 2 different kinds of organizing structures almost, even though they are similar organizations with the same organizing goal, and often some of the same people. I would imagine that this dynamic is replicated times almost 50 for most of the U.S. states that have a chapter and also campus stuff. So there's also, for the different kinds of regular chapters, you'll either be in YDSA, right, or you'll have a regular DSA chapter. Those will be for a city, like NYC DSA or a Denver DSA. It could be for a county if the county has a sizable amount of people who want to organize a chapter, or even an entire region. So the Delaware DSA has 2 branches within one chapter. We just have the entire state split by north and south. Around Delaware, there's a lot of unclaimed territory that either Greater Baltimore, Philly even, or us could claim. But there's just not interest around there yet. There haven't been any people organizing anything for that demand to really be happening. So there might be more chapters. There might be in Louisiana very few chapters. There might not be one on the Bayou. But if anybody wanted to start one, if there's an area that doesn't have a DSA chapter yet, I believe it takes only 3 or 5 people to start an organizing committee, and that has a development path to being a chapter. You can check that all out at the national site. So the kind of fun part that you guys might see online and are very curious about is the caucuses. This is the second part of the structure of DSA. There's the base and there's a superstructure, yeah? Just like with everything else. DSA is the base, the chapters, all the work that's done. The superstructure is this ideological, we'll say Geist. There is a Geist to DSA and to the American political landscape. I do think that is expressed in some way in this discussion of ideas between caucuses that's always ongoing between chapters, between national and through the online world that we all use to communicate with each other. There are caucuses that a caucus is just an ideological formation. They are not actually rigidly defined. They have very different like ways of defining themselves. Actually, it's like the Libertarian Socialist Caucus is a very big, broad tent, not just of libertarian socialists, but of left comms, of council communists, of anarchists, and many more. Bread and Roses, they speak of themselves like democratic road to socialism type of like strategy. Groundwork has a similar deal. They're very pro full member democracy, and they tell themselves as eco-socialists. So they like each of these has very different orientations of like looking at politics. The LSC is all these different pre-existing ideologies. Bread and Roses is a set of ideas and methods, and Groundwork also a couple ideas and methods. Caucuses change, caucuses grow, caucuses break. I'm gonna have another presentation with the caucuses where I go deeper into this one. But as of right now, these aren't formally recognized by DSA. I'm a caucus member. I'm in the LSC. I have a really good time there. I think they do a really good job of showing direct member democracy and teaching people and getting people involved in that way. But there are countless more caucuses, even like local ones, like the Mountain Caucus, that I forget where they are, but just over a couple states, they have like an electoral program for that area. So we'll see how these shake out in the future. Everybody's kind of got a different way of expressing their belief. I think this is a very exciting and dynamic thing to see within DSA, and that we'll see a lot more motion here in the future. So coming out of all of these things, we end up agreeing on a national political platform. It was called Workers Deserve More, I believe. I think it came from the 2023 convention. Hopefully somebody knows more and might comment. But we got the chance to renew it at the 2025 convention. I believe that passed with very little issue, and it holds a lot of these things on it. I would check out platform.dsausa.org if you're interested in learning more and seeing what the last version of it was. The newer version was updated recently with, on top of international solidarity, anti-imperialism, etc., actually abolition of the carceral state was not part of the like abolition. I think it's the direct words is like abolition of the carceral forces of the capitalist state. That was not part of the platform before 2025. Recently it was added because of the just insane overreach of the executive branch in the United States in the current era. I'm very grateful for that, but there's a lot more than just what you see on this screen. Please check it out if you are interested in learning more. And so in order to vote on these things, you got to be a member. Only members are allowed to vote. Only members can introduce resolutions, can fight for campaigns, can make shit happen. But honestly, a lot of people aren't members. A lot of people have lapsed membership or like just like are around, and they do a lot of volunteer work in orgs that are adjacent. Because we do recognize that this is a working class organization, and having to pay a regular amount just to participate, it is a barrier, right? And so there's more than one way to get involved if you can't afford to. There is a dues waiver if you are interested in being a member and can't afford it. But membership is the way that your voice becomes equal to everybody else within within DSA. Join. Different chapters will have definitions of a chapter or of a member eligibility being active sometimes, and from national there is the idea of good standing. Good standing means that they're like all fully paid up in their dues, and they're like constitutionally a member of DSA. Different chapters' activity requirements might preclude them from having a say in certain things unless they're active, unless they're around, unless they like know who's involved. Because there's a big issue with people. I mean, there's a big strategic possible issue of brigading. Because it costs just a little bit to buy a membership. Somebody who has a lot of money could buy many memberships for people, and manipulate votes very easily in this way. So different chapters are doing different experiments to try and make sure that there is still a democratic control of their chapter. It's of the people that are actually there and active and know what's going on, and not just people who are tuned out and sleeping and voting based on random information they see on twitter.com. So different chapters will have an activity requirement. Maybe it's like come to a meeting in the last month. They're normally quite generous. But those are things that are needed to keep the member democracy strong here. Yeah. So I've talked about all these different formations, all these different things. This is the graphic from DSA National that shows the different pieces of DSA as it's kind of organizationally constructed. The way that this is oriented, it's kind of sideways, but the idea is that everything is equal. So the membership, they elect delegates to the convention. That convention creates the NPC steering committee and the NPC. There's all these different other formations at the national level. Some chapters don't have a labor group, for example, don't have an electoral working group, for example. So there are these committees at the national level that do that kind of organizing and that help with that kind of work. There's national publications, working groups, commissions, etc. I think I've got some more examples of those coming up. But generally, any member can join any of those things. Any member can pitch themselves as a delegate to convention and get elected to do that. And the NPC and the delegates at the convention, they will vote for staff to help out, because there is a national organization that needs people to staff it as well. There's not just volunteers, it's not just the people who are political actors. There needs to also be a staff who is in a way nonpartisan and working in the best interest of DSA. So it will be those people subordinate to the directors, the NPC, and the convention. Hope that's not too much. If you're interested in learning more, this is something that's on the DSA National website. Those staff that I was talking about, I haven't interacted with them much, but I do know that we are paying for some people to help with administrative work. They do a lot of chapter member support. Like they'll help set up electoral stuff if you guys don't have that yet. They maintain member databases and facilitate fundraising and like proper money flow throughout the org. Some of those national bodies that are created by the members and by these conventions and the NPC, they're all member-led, just like everything else. They'll have a specific idea, like an idea or an identity that they're based around, and they'll coordinate a national campaign. For example, there is a growth and development committee. This is a committee that's tasked itself with analyzing different chapters and seeing how they've developed and how they've changed over time, and they create guidances and resources about those things so that other chapters can learn from them. There are some who are put together for electoral work, for certain interest groups, and on and on and on. So yeah, we've got GDC, the Growth and Development Committee, National Electoral Committee. There's working groups like the AfroSoc Working Group, which is kind of a caucus, but also kind of a working group. The Housing Justice Commission, which works on housing justice work all across the country, and on and on. Again, recurring theme. A lot of this stuff is online, findable, and public. So if you decide to become a member, here's how it kind of goes. You start as a constitutional member in big box members, and depending on where you are, you might be put into a local chapter. Since I was in Delaware, I got put into the Delaware Democratic Socialists of America chapter. Some states don't have a chapter. Some states need someone to set them up. Not many left, and there's a lot of territory that still is left to be claimed on the U.S. map by different chapters. If you're in a university, you'll probably go to your university-wide DSA if there is one. And if there isn't a chapter around, that's kind of the reason that the national working groups are there, as well as them being national formations for these interests. People who don't have a chapter, they become at-large members. And so they are still constitutionally members. They can join any of the national working groups to do things that they would like to do. And then here's a trusty little diagram. I think this is stolen from Fort Collins DSA. That's why the slide looks funny. So a little bit about Delaware DSA. This is my chapter. So it's a newer chapter. It started in 2021. DSA, I think, started in the 70s, so this is a really young chapter comparatively. At the time we made this, we had around 230 members. Now we have almost 300. There's around 12 active committees and working groups here, and we're really trying to be a place where the community can grow, connect, and try to experiment with the local democracy. So our org structure is a little different from the national one. It really is the same. I just flipped it so it makes a little more sense. The general body can elect, create, can join, etc. Working groups, committees, commissions, those things are subordinate to the steering committee, which is also elected by the general body. And all of these things are generally done at general body meetings. So every couple months, whole membership body can get together, say what they need to say, deliberate, argue, make choices. This structure is like clearly scalable. We have as many committees and working groups as people want to work in and can work in. We will shutter a group or icebox it if something doesn't have a lot of activity in it. But in general, everything here is run by members, for members, and through their interests and their energy. At the top, the membership is of course the top, so all of this is subordinate to the membership at those general body meetings. But they'll elect a steering committee, same way that the national has a national political committee. This steering committee has 2 co-chairs, which lead it, and a bunch of facilitative roles around it. Branch chairs who represent members. Secretary keeps secretarial stuff together. Membership engagement coordinator, who is a very pivotal role here. And the treasurer, who of course keeps the money looking good. In our chapter, we have a norm of running priority campaigns, and so this is something that they had before I joined, that they had in the bylaws. Like the chapter chooses a couple priorities for the leadership to focus on. In 2025, these were our priorities. Very, very broad-reaching, very, I think, ideologically radical, but also things that are popular. And I think all of these were passed with very little debate, except for the Delaware against apartheid. But this year we chose new priorities. I haven't updated the slides yet, but those priorities are community safety and community care. And so we're still figuring out how we want to enact those things. Different chapters don't have this as far as I know, except for some of the bigger ones like NYC and LA. But the way that member sentiment as a gauge of community sentiment can be used to propel ideas forward into like lasting projects that have a tangible impact on a community, that's the project of DSA, and this is the way that we're kind of working our way through that. And so we're doing those things through our committees and working groups. We have a bunch of different committees here. Some of them are kind of unique. For example, Red Rabbits is not actually part of DSA. They're kind of adjacent to it. A lot of DSA members will volunteer in there because they will help out at our events. They'll be our security. They'll be medics, and they will help out at protests to keep everybody safe. Socialists in office is the way to speak to our electeds and to get our electeds into their positions. The steering is, of course, something you need to get voted into, but everything else here, anybody could join just by becoming a member. Except for Red Rabbits, because that's independent. You don't have to be a member to be part of them. But for the moment, like our arts and culture working group, I think I said that we have some iceboxed ideas. If people aren't working in these groups, if they aren't doing things like housing justice, actually needs to be moved to the icebox as well. Because even though there's a lot of work to be done in these areas, there's a lot of things that people want to do. There's just not hands. And so if people want to bring those things in, they absolutely can join and restart those groups from where they left off. Or even start new ones, yeah? I've already done that. Some examples for our events. Last year we held a vigil for some victims of ICE, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, amongst the countless others that we don't know about. We also regularly do a book club. Right now it's on pause, but one of the last things we read was Black Against Empire. Incredible read. We also went over Nkrumah's neocolonialism, or I think it's neo-imperialism, and Parenti's Black Shirts and Reds. I mean, really incredible reads. We have a really good discussion there. And so, if any of this speaks to you, if you find this interesting at all, you should probably join. It's a pretty mutable organization, and your voice will be heard, even if it's not appreciated. And so, just experiencing that at least is enough of a reason to join DSA and see what the hubbub is all about. But for all the haters and losers, I love you. But yeah, because this is our member orientation thing, generally like to ask people questions. What do you like to do? What do you care about? And then quick little propaganda. It's much easier to fight back as a pack than as one person. Yeah, love to hear comments. Love to see questions in the comment section. Please engage with this if you've got any questions. I'm sure we'll have people that'll want to respond and to get back to you. So thank you so much for your time. If you watched through this whole thing, I am going to try and put out a couple more of these. I have one more that's ready on all the caucuses based on the LSC guide to the caucuses. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good one.